Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. So, as I was watching a documentary on the LA Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, it really got me to thinking about our modern condition and how that serial killer's behavior can help us mothers to recognize that even though we are stay at home moms or part time working moms, having a tool of self defense is extremely necessary. Now, if you're living in another country and you think the world is made of ice cream and candy bars, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never test you by having a criminal come after you, well, that's your prerogative. But I rather deal with reality and what is far more common. And so, this occultist, who was a Latino, to his victims, he would make them promise themselves to Satan, to Shaitan. He would lurk during the night and do home invasions. And they're very violent home invasions. As we know now, home invasions are on the rise, but liberals who are in the media who want to defund the police are not highlighting the violent crime and home invasions because they are also anti-Second Amendment and anti-police. And so they have a huge incentive to not write about those stories, and fake fact checkers will constantly minimize the violence that's perpetrated in and upon people who live in liberal areas. And so what I found really disturbing as I was listening to this documentary about this individual is that he had also watched his cousin shoot. His cousin shot his wife in the face, and then Richard Ramirez, who is now dead, watched his cousin do that. And that this sadist, he would mix sex and aggression and watch very violent pornography. Okay? And when he was in court, he even had the pentagram on his hand. When you look at him and such, you can feel the kind of negative energy just beaming through his eyes. What I find about this is that ex-Muslims and atheists constantly mock the idea of evil existing. They don't think there's some type of spiritual component. They don't think that religion has a net benefit to people's morality, and they oftentimes align themselves with the Church of Satan, minimize it, say occultists aren't bad, Satanism isn't bad, oh, heavy metal and these new rap artists who are incorporating this symbology into their music, it's all harmless. But then they'll say that if your kid wears a hijab to school, that's oppression. And so we can see that their priorities are pretty backwards, right? And as you go along this path of researching these serial killers' minds, how they have no mercy, no empathy, and they are devoid of the fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you begin to realize that having fear of punishment after death is very beneficial to society, especially since if you don't have fear and you think, oh, all there is to this world is what I make of it, this is very scary because it can incentivize people to go about causing corruption in the land, consequence free. And a lot of these killers, they're not afraid to go to jail. They're not afraid of necessarily even getting caught. Some of them want to get caught, and they enjoy what they do. So religion being there helps people to recognize that there is redemption and there is justice and there is consequence. And an atheistic worldview, for them saying, no, you just go to the dirt. Do any evil you want. You know, if you escape the law, that's it. But there'll be no punishment for you. Nah. It's not the strongest form of ethics and morality. And it is quite interesting how I never see atheists, never, I've never met one who makes a channel that consistently mocks and goes after the occultic agenda. It's always them going after Christians and Muslims. And it's usually evolved around moral decency of not being a hedonist, around not using intoxicants and whatnot. And so this, you can begin to realize, is their Achilles heel, because this guy Richard Ramirez used to drop acid. It's a very strong drug, and his childhood friends said once he started using acid, it's like really changed this individual. Now liberals will say, well, if we legalize tax and regulate it, we'll regulate it so it's not so strong. Then again, people will realize that SSRIs, serotonin reuptake inhibitors, are pills that a lot of these mass shooters who go and attack schools are upon. And so many of the psychotropics that are pushed upon children and adults have really strange side effects. The brain is a very unique muscle that we have, and when we put all this stuff in it that's made by a lab coat, we don't exactly know how everything's going to pan out, and it's interacting with your unique being, and it can make people go better or go worse. So we can't over romanticize what pills are and what they do, and then give ourselves a sort of blind spot to the possible outcomes from said mode of therapy. And what's also quite sadistic about this individual, the Night Stalker, is he would sexually assault his victims, from children to the elderly. And this to me is quite scary, because he would lurk in the night where people felt so safe that they would never lock their doors or windows. They had no tools of self-defense, and they were pretty helpless. And then he would find a way in and beat them, torture them, tie them up, do horrific things that are quite shocking. And I just go and think about how if those families would have had a guard dog, a fence, secure doors, secure windows, a firearm, knew how to use it, if there was more police patrolling, more people being vigilant upon their neighbors, protecting the community, things like that wouldn't happen. But what's also scary is that people like Lil Nas X, other terrible, Madonna, Lady Gaga, you name it, even Rihanna, they have these occultic symbols in their music, and it gets the youth really interested in that. And the ex-Muslims and the atheists will say this will have zero influence on their mind. Nope, evil doesn't exist. It's not possible for them to be motivated into becoming a killer or dipping into the dark arts. And if they get into the dark arts, it won't have any effect upon them. They'll be just fine. And I don't think that's true. And I don't think many of you agree with their stance. And so as we see occultism rise in America and being pushed and promoted by the media and social media banning content that is academically pointing out occultic symbolism, what it means, why we shouldn't have it and whatnot, as conspiracy theory stuff, well, they then leave the door open for the other occultic agenda to have a sort of monopoly upon the social scene, and to get boosted by the algorithm because there is no counterculture that is allowed to mention it. And then it's interesting how YouTube and other sites will leave up the fake stuff that muddies the waters and is illogical and not really well done, which then makes people trust less in the information and push it off as hearsay and not important. Now, about a year and a half ago, I went to a kids book fair with my little one. Wanted to see if they had any kids cookbooks and whatnot. And as I went down the aisles and the tables where the books were displayed, I came across a lot of witch, vampire themes. That was the number one theme. And I found this disturbing because you couldn't find lots of pro-family, Christian, Muslim type of content. Rather, they had the occultic content and they put it as harmless, as if occultism isn't a religion. And so, this is bizarre. And all the books were aimed at girls. And women who go into the occultic arts are very risky towards the safety of men and children. And then you begin to realize that the feminist movement serves the occultic agenda through human sacrifice, through abortion, the feminization of men, the destruction of the patriarchy, the destruction of gender roles, the destruction of gender itself, and the targeting of children through medical transitioning. You begin to see sterilization, anti-family narratives popping up, and barren, bitter corporate women who lack that sort of spiritualness to them when it comes to children and motherhood in general, which serves the occultic agenda. And when I was just thinking about this Richard Ramirez monster, you look at all the cocktail of combinations of how he got to where he was, how his evil and malice expressed itself, and what we must do in order to counteract such stuff like that. And having pro mother content is extremely important, and that's what I've tried to do. I won't tolerate women who say, oh, you idealize motherhood. And it's like, why aren't you going after the women who degrade motherhood? I do notice that there are more voices against showing the positive mothers of motherhood than there are against those who are degrading it and saying children aren't important, children are a bunch of clump of cells, stay-at-home wives are parasites, all this stuff that they say, and you're like, these are very unhappy people. These are people who are broken inside. They need healing. And if a woman like that gets around a little boy, might create another monster like Richard Ramirez. Because when you lack that fear of your maker, you have no mercy. You don't have any sense of accountability. You don't believe in the hereafter. You don't believe you'll face any consequences outside this realm for what corruption you spread upon the earth and what pain you inflicted. Well, you're going to breed some people who are going to do some heinous crimes because they're going to get their satisfaction in other ways. Now, the violent pornography he watched goes into a lot of what's happening now online, how social media will promote pornography, but you can't have a political discussion. And I find this quite odd, because some of these serial killers, they point out how they go down a deeper tunnel of it starts in this category and ends in worse and worse and worse until you get into the really dark stuff, which is what this Richard Ramirez was into. Starts off in a normal way. Porn isn't normal, but you get what I'm saying. And then it slowly gets into something worse. Atheists will say that's a slippery slope fallacy, but these serial killers are confessing why their fetish is linked to violence. And a lot of leftists will say you can't kink shame. You can't kink shame. And they do BDSM and they do really strange torture rituals with black leather, this kind of stuff, right? And they will never admit that there could be a dark side to that. That a darker side of someone's soul could come out, manifest itself, and go past the point of wanting consent. Because they want the real thing, they don't want an actor. Which puts people in grave danger. And the more they see these women do hedonistic things, the more they crave purity. And then that's when they go after the children, is because they crave what is pure, because all the women have been defiled. All the women have become harlots. And so it seems like a vicious cycle from what I got from watching this particular individual, who is quite troubling. And even more so, leftist, secular atheists, feminists will say that person doesn't deserve the death penalty. And I find this quite odd. They will advocate for an innocent, helpless human being in the womb to be dismembered and pulled apart. They'll fight to get rid of the death penalty because it's inhumane and uncivilized. And this is troubling, because we're getting to a point where we're soft on crime, have more mercy towards criminals than we do towards the unborn. And so, what I learned essentially from this episode that I was watching about the LA Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, is that you need to be secure in your persons. Secure your home. Be alert. Have self-defense tools. Don't let the liberals take that right away from you. And they're trying to do it incrementally. Take self-defense classes. Educate yourself. Be confident. Be wise. And educate your children on the dangers of individuals. And you don't have to open the door for everybody as well. Someone comes a knocking, pretending to be whatever, like they need help or something, be cautious. It could be a trick, it could be a scam. They could just use that to break into your home. Be wise. And make sure that you do the right thing for your family. Being feminine doesn't mean you become weak and let a criminal harm you and your family. Don't confuse that. There's nothing wrong with defending your home while your man is at work from a vicious, demonic entity. But it is quite sad how he forced his victims to pledge allegiance to Shaitan, and he would draw in blood a pentagram on the wall after his scene. But ex-Muslims aren't really concerned with that. To them, they just make Satanism sound like something cool, posh. Just shows you their morality. Hopefully, we all can do better, inshallah. But protect your kids, educate them, and don't think that the world is made of cookies and ice cream. Be vigilant, because the world is getting more violent. And there are less consequences now due to the defunding of police and the soft on crime approach of have mercy and reform them. Be careful. Be very careful.